Today, the question of whether a frozen embryo is a living person went before an appeals court. The case stems from the fertility clinic disaster at university hospitals more than a year ago. 4,000 eggs and embryos were destroyed, more than 900 families impacted.
And many patients filed lawsuits, but one couple took a different course of action. Homa Bash was at today's hearing, and Homa, they're fighting to convince the courts that their embryos should be considered people, not property.
That's right, Danita. There was no decision made today. That is something that will take weeks, even months. But there are a lot of eyes on this case because it could set precedent around the country. A question that's been asked so many times. When does life begin?
Since the law in Ohio is not clear.
It's difficult for Wendy Penniman not to be emotional.
To imagine that they weren't children at any point in time to anybody, that's all we thought they were. They're our kids.
It's what Wendy and her husband Rick are fighting to prove in court, that frozen embryos should be considered people, not property.
The law is not clear.
Their attorney Bruce Taubman saying it's the right thing to do.
These embryos are human beings. The people treat them as human beings. It's unfortunate and tragic that the hospital did not.
Oral arguments Wednesday in front of a three-judge panel in the Court of Appeals.
An embryo is not yet a fetus.
Attorneys for university hospitals arguing that Ohio law does not see embryos as human beings, and doing so would lead down a problematic path.
So at this moment in time, the law is clear that an embryo is not a person, and even the changes that are afoot will not change the law in a manner that would make an embryo a person.
But Taubman says modern science is advanced enough to be on the Penniman side.
And the time-lapse photography that shows how embryos are human beings from the time of conception.
For Wendy Penniman, the legalities are one thing. Her family's loss is another.
They've still stolen something that you can't put a price tag on. And that's the bottom line. And they need to take ownership of that.
Again, no decisions today. It'll likely be months before the judges make that ruling. And a few things could happen here. They could send it back down to the lower courts where it was initially dismissed. They could rule in favor of the couple and move this further along, or they could dismiss it altogether. Wendy Penniman telling us she's willing to take her fight all the way to the Supreme Court. Homa Bash, News 5.